If the Jazz don't capture the flag, Cooper Flagg, what other potential All-Stars, of which I believe there could be 7 in the 2025 NBA draft, should the Jazz tank for, if the Jazz tank? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin. Excited to be back with you as always. I'm always honored to have the opportunity to fill in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. You guys probably know me by now if you're an everydayer, but if you're new to this and you're wondering who I am, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan who's a credentialed NBA Big Board analyst on Locked On NBA Big Board. I went to the Combine in both 2023 and in 2024. A Utah Jazz broadcast assistant and statistician, lover of college basketball. So I don't expect all the geeky numbers of usual to be gone, but I'll bring a unique perspective, knowing a ton about the recent additions to the Jazz roster and those the Jazz could add in the future. So I'm hoping to make this a really fun time for you guys as the Jazz begin to rebuild and eventually contend, because I'm right there with you. I really need it to happen, want it to happen, and I can't wait for this upcoming draft. So that's why I'm giving you the primer here right now. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is comment anything below. And today's question is, which player, other than Cooper Flagg, is your favorite? Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. So in the first segment, we're going to talk about Cooper Flagg and just how great he is, how he could help the Jazz, and much, much more. In the second segment, we'll talk about the duo heading to Rutgers and explain why that's not a bad consolation prize should the Jazz fail to capture the flag, as in Cooper Flagg. And then there are a few top-tier talents available still in picks 4 through 7. We'll break down their games. So let's dive right in. And I'm joined by someone who knows a lot about their games, and we'll talk about them ad nauseum with me on Locked On NBA Big Board. That's Richard Stayman, a.k.a. Mavs Draft on Twitter. If you don't follow him already, you got to give him a follow. Thank you for joining Locked On Jazz.
Yeah, good to be back.
Always a pleasure to have you. So, simple question. What do Jazz fans need to know about Cooper Flagg that has elicited this excitement of fans and also this like kind of sneaky adjustment of teams from the front offices where they're like, you know what, we're not good enough. Let's contend to get Cooper Flagg, aka be the worst team in the league, try to get this guy when teams didn't even really do it for Wembanyama, who was generational. He was viewed as that and has been thus far.
Yeah, Cooper Flagg's a 6'9", just truly versatile player. I think he's a strong defensive anchor, one of the best defensive high school prospects I've ever scouted, where he can guard 1 through 5. He controls the paint very well. He reminds me of Jonathan Isaac on the defensive end. I love that comparison for him. And honestly, if you got Jonathan Isaac for 82 games with optimism for the shot and offense to come around, that's a really high level player because you're getting a defensive player of the year caliber player with capable offense where he's going to score almost 20 points per game. I'd say safely north of 15 at his prime. That's a really good player when you combine that with all defense capabilities, and he just makes everyone around him better on both ends of the floor. Those kind of guys stick in the league.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think what has the most excitement, because I've been of the group that says, well, is he truly a number one if his offense isn't amazing? Like, is there more potential for another player if his offense is his second most coveted thing? I'm not saying he's not the most well-rounded, but sometimes offense right now is becoming so coveted, it makes it a harder sell. I was being a little bit facetious when I said that to begin with, but I was just trying to pick the brains of people who know more about his game than I do. I'm starting to dig into the film, and I'm really excited. I think he's going to be the player of the year in college basketball as a freshman. You don't see that too often. Zion was the last one. What I like about his game is he embraces his size, but has the skill set of some of those players that have that same size and play smaller. He uses his size. He uses his physicality on both ends of the floor, scores from all sorts of places, but he likes to go inside. His shot's improving. He reminds me, and I'm not saying a one-to-one comparison, but he's got a little bit of a Chet Holmgren-y competitiveness, maybe. And you know who I compared him to in terms of that side was Kevin Garnett. It's this competitiveness mixed with skill set and just tenacity that you don't often see. And then his build is not quite as long as Chet, but he is big. And I could see him developing into Scottie Pippen on offense. I'm not saying full Hall of Famer Scottie Pippen, but when Scottie Pippen wasn't playing Robin to Jordan's Batman, he was an awesome offensive player, was a first team All NBA. And you could see Flagg have that type of defensive presence. Offensively, I think the games have evolved, and that's why there's that argument of like, oh, you'd probably rather have a Tracy McGrady on offense than Scottie Pippen. And that's what maybe Ace Bailey could be. But I'll take the total player for certain. I'm not saying he's Scottie Pippen, so I'm not saying that to elicit that comparison. But it's that type of game where he can handle the ball and create for others. He's got this skill set that's coveted on both ends, but it's not this flashy scoring type. It's kind of a no unnecessary motions, gonna score somehow, be productive, and just an ultimate competitive winner.
Yeah, and I think if you put him next to a star too, I mean that it's the exact same thing, kind of like you said. Like he can be very good on his own, but I think next to another star, he's going to pop even more. Like let's just say that somehow the Jazz both keep marketing long term and get the number 1 pick and get Cooper Flagg, like some crazy outcome. That'd be a really good duo. I think he makes up for a lot of Lowry's weaknesses and vice versa. I think that kind of is where you look at what Lowry can't do and what Cooper can't do. And I think that actually makes both players better and just the Jazz a more complete team.
No, I agree. And that leads us somewhere. Lowry, for those of you wondering, and you're saying, well, this is coming out on August 5th. Let's talk about Lowry. That'll be the next episode once I have an understanding of what direction it may be, and rather than rumors, I'm going to give you a thoughts on pluses and negatives. So tune in for the next episode. We're definitely going to talk about Lowry, but Cooper Flagg, it matters to this equation because the Jazz, if they re-sign Lowry or if they don't, are committing to not being very good. And so this is why I'm trying to inform you guys of the players that are options for the Utah Jazz to get. And you guys can formulate your own opinions on which players supplement the Jazz the best. So final question on Cooper Flagg, Richard, before we get to a litany of other prospects that are really enticing as well, but maybe not quite as much as the grand prize Flagg. What is the fit for Cooper Flagg, and what is the highest end outcome you can see for him? So fit for the Jazz and highest end outcome for Cooper Flagg.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the KG stuff, like KG's ESPN put him at the top 25 players of the century, so it's a bit rich, but like that level of where if you can get him even 75% of his prime is a really good player. I think, again, it's just that Jonathan Isaac with offense is a high-end outcome where you're looking at an all-star defensive player of the year, all-defense guy who can compete for all-NBA. That goes a very long way. If you have an all-NBA player in a smaller market like Salt Lake City, I think you can compete really well and stay good for a long time. I think, remind me, sorry, I went in reverse order. So it was best outcome and then the fit.
Yeah, the fit for the
Jazz. The fit's tough because we just don't know what's happening with Lowry marketing because he's the best player on the team. That's going to change a lot.
Well, we'll assume he's there. Assume he's there.
Yeah.
For this.
I think if he stays, I mean, you got a really strong offensive star, defensive star that they just and both have more than just that like simple overview. But I think that actually goes a really long way to building one of the top front courts in the entire NBA.
Yeah, I think that's not all that crazy. If you were to guess what his high end points total would be, what would you estimate and why? Because we talk about him being Jonathan Isaac with offense, but that doesn't get everyone riveted up the way that everyone's excited based on what he did at Team USA.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could get up to 20. I don't think that's that far-fetched. I think he'll have at least 1 or 2 seasons of that. I think he's going to hover more around that 15 to 18. But, if you're hovering, you're probably going to float. Like, you're going to get 1 year above there. So I would say probably around 15 to 18 with a few years of 20 maybe. And this is like a very optimistic outcome. But I think 20 is attainable.
I actually think he'll be north of 20. And so I will be salivating along with Jazz fans and hoping that the Jazz have a chance to get Cooper Flagg. So coming up next, we're going to talk about some other guys the Jazz would love to have a chance to nab in the draft that are not bad consolation prizes. We're going to head to Rutgers, to Piscataway, New Jersey, coming up next. But first, let me tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I also want to tell you guys about Chevy, Murdoch Chevy here in Utah. Murdochs have been in Utah for over 80 years. That's longevity. Chevy is American. It's the epitome of an American car. You think of a movie, you see a truck moving down the road and it's an old Western. Oh, that's a Chevy for sure. It's located in Woods Cross and Logan, and there's a great lineup of Chevy trucks, the Colorado and the Silverado. And you can go to the website and see all the latest deals and what's in the inventory. The amazing lineup of SUVs are also on that lineup and on the website, up to date. How many models are available, what are the specs, everything. The SUVs feature the Tahoe, the Suburban, the Blazer, the Equinox, and the Trax. So check those out. Make sure to go get yourself a Murdoch Chevy and tell them you listen to Locked On Jazz, and they'll love to hear that. By the way, are you guys watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All righty, welcome back. I'm Leif Thulin, joined by Richard Stayman, a.k.a. Mavs Draft. But he's talking about the Jazz and who they could draft. The Jazz is assuming Lauri Markkanen is back, or if he's not, the Jazz do figure to be in the equation for the lottery. Cooper Flagg, he's the big fish. Who else is in the equation? We're going to head to Piscataway. We talked about that. You're like, what? Why Rutgers? Well, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, son of Ron Harper. That's the reason to head there. Richard, you've seen more of them than I have, and I'm already excited by both. Give me a pitch on each of them and maybe your preference.
Yeah, I've seen both of these guys, really Ace Bailey for the last 8 months, and then Dylan Harper for the last year plus. So I have Ace Bailey as my number 2 prospect overall, right behind Cooper. I had him for number 1 for a while, but then I just started realizing, that safeness plus ceiling of Cooper is just so high. I can't unseat him until something else happens. But with Ace Bailey, pretty much the sell is this. He's a 2-way, 3-level scorer, right? Where he can create his own shot. It's still a little bit rusty, but I think there's upside to be able to do it. He is a strong shooter. He can come off of screens really well. He defends well. Just kind of that ideal wing. If you were to mold a wing in a lab and say, all right, we need him 6'9", like you want to make him as perfect as possible of a wing, it's Ace Bailey. Like he does everything, and I think he can hit tough shots that he's going to score 25 points a game for at least 1 year in his career. He is that high level. I know some scouts think he needs to tone down some of his shot selection, but he played with no other high major prospects in his school. So I'm interested to see how he plays with Dylan Harper, who is more of a point guard. I've seen some people compare him to Cade. Kind of see it. I think he's a little bit different. He's more of a true combo guard, like the highest level playmaking version of a combo guard. I think that's kind of him. He can play defense very well. He has no real holes in his game, but the big question for this year is, can he pop as a star? And that's the big question I think that scouts have.
Yeah, those are fair questions. So you said you had Ace at 2. Where is Harper for you?
Yeah, I have him right behind him at 3. So This is my top 3 in order.
So I didn't know that for certain, but I assumed it would be close. So that's why we headed to Piscataway. Ace Bailey, to me, I haven't watched a ton yet, but when I watched Brandon Miller once, many of you guys have heard the story. Richard can confirm this. I watched Brandon Miller once randomly in July of 2022, and I texted Richard, Raphael, and Tony Jones. And I said, that guy's the best freshman in America by a mile. And that was before Nick Smith was considered to be, Anthony Black. There was a litany of other guys. And I said, he reminds me of Paul George. And it was like, okay, but his shot selection's not great. The reason I bring that up is not to toot my own horn. Brandon Miller's been really good, but I don't think he's quite Paul George, actually. I ended up saying he was more Danny Granger than Paul George by the end of the draft season, and he went 2, and I was right there in the main frame of it. But the reason I bring him up is when I watch Ace Bailey, I see Brandon Miller. And I see a probably a slightly better athlete, a little less polished. I think Brandon Miller's ability to get into his jump shots, where the question was shot selection, my argument was, you know what, it doesn't bother me that much, because if you can make those, then you have the license to shoot those, particularly if you have a bad team. I don't love that it looks a little ball hoggy. It looks like he's settling at times. But I said the same thing for Jason Tatum, who I did not like watching in college, but I had him number 1 that year. I said the same thing about Paolo Banchero, who I had number 1. It's that when they settle, but they can shoot them, that means once you coach them into not settling, they have the utmost potential. I believe that about Ace Bailey. Bailey's got the build of like Tracy McGrady almost. Not quite the athlete, but he reminds me of Brandon Miller, Tracy McGrady, Brandon Ingram, like those long, wiry wings. And he's just got different twitch than all of them. There's a little bit of nuance between those, but he's the guy, aside from Cooper Flagg, that has me the most excited, despite the flaw of, he's a little inefficient at times. Sometimes he shoots different shots. He's just got this it about him. And so I'm more excited about him than Dylan Harper. But I will say this about Dylan Harper. I think Harper's going to be a better collegiate player.
I can see that. I agree, by the way. I think with Ace, like, he's got that T-Mac play style. Like, I think that's a very much an aesthetic comp for him. I'm interested to see what Dylan Harper does. Just like, if he's super efficient, I'm not going to overthink him, and I'm going to keep him. Like, I just have a hard time, unless these guys absolutely bust or somebody else is so dang good. I just have a hard time having these guys unseated. Like, I feel like this is going to be the year where I anchor the most to my preseason rankings, which a lot of us do. But I think that this is a year where it's especially possible just because of how good these guys are in high school.
Yeah. So Dylan Harper, let's talk about his play style really briefly. What is, I know you said combo guard, you said some people talk about Cade. What is the thing that if he does really well, you can move him up, versus if he doesn't do great, you're going to drop him?
Honestly, just gaudy stats would move him up. I think if he averaged almost, I think this is probably like 15, 5 and 5 on like 50% shooting, like, that's a guy you can't not have him in your top 3. The thing that would hurt him, I think, is really just the shooting and the overall efficiency. Like, that's the big swing for me. He can be good at defense, and like, is he turning the ball over? Like, that's really where I have my questions are. How will that translate up? So I think he's super talented and can. I'm just interested to see what it looks like against guys who are in their 6th year of college.
That's fair. I think he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, and he's going to have the ability to control a basketball game, which gives him an upper leg to Ace Bailey in terms of collegiate production. I think Bailey's going to have those flashes of, oh my goodness, there's only maybe one other player in the entire country who can come close to sniffing what he just did. And that's how I felt about Brandon Miller. So I think those are probably 2 and 3, but there's a guy that is not playing collegiate basketball I adore, and his name's Nolan Traore. He's French, he's lightning quick, and he's 6'4", and there's nothing about his game that I dislike. So I think he's got a chance to infiltrate the top 3. So we'll talk about him coming up next, along with a plethora of other guards and even a big guy who's representing a nation in the Olympics right now that are afterthoughts somehow because of how much attention Cooper Flagg and the Rutgers duo are getting. We're going to talk about them coming up next, right after I give you a little talk about Game Time. Have you guys ever been to an MLB game? Because I have, and they're awesome. It's never been a better time to go than right now because of Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the MLB, which usually makes getting regular season tickets and playoff tickets easier and faster. Prices on Game Time app, in fact, actually might go down the closer it gets to tip-off, which is pretty insane. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. They have great, easy to find and buy MLB tickets for every kind of event in your area. In fact, it's not only MLB. I just bought tickets to the U.S. Open, watching some tennis using Game Time, and made sure to peruse views from the seats in the venues and make sure I use the panoramic view to get the best viewpoint to watch the best players in the world go at it in the Big Apple. Game Time also will credit you 110% of the difference with the lowest price guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets for Game Time or MLB or whatever you want to get. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today with last-minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. All righty. Welcome back to Locked on Jazz. I'm Leif Tulin, joined by Richard Stayman, Mavs Draft. We are going to briefly discuss the games of Nolan Traore, VJ Edgecombe, Common Malalock, and a few others. We said there are 7 All-Stars. Richard, I'll turn the floor over to you before you have to run. Nolan Traore, am I crazy to think he can infiltrate the top 3?
I don't. He's an ideal guard, right? Quick first step, good touch. Jumper might need more efficiency. I think some people are torn because it's like right at the line of shot really 75%. He's high level playmaker, actually averaged more assists than Luka Doncic did at similar age with Real Madrid. Now, different team, of course, but still in France at the highest league there. I think it's really just will the jump shot get there, or how long will it take to get the jump shot to get there? A little bit torn on the defense too, but I think just that high level playmaking and the ability to get to the rim, that stuff is like he's an absolute, like he's probably the best pick and roll guard in the class. And when you're the best pick and roll guard at a high level and you're 18 years old, you're probably going to be a lottery pick. So I like him a lot. He'd go top 5.
And he's not small. He's not small at all. He actually dominated against Americans. He played in the was it the Nike Hoop Summit, I believe? He played in the Hoop Summit, and I thought he was the best player in the Hoop Summit. Now, Cooper Flagg had moments where he controlled the game, and I think he commanded the most attention because of the knowledge of who he was and how his already established fanfare. But Traore had the game where you saw him and you thought, wow, that guy's playing the NBA style to a T, getting to the paint, controlling everything, scoring whenever he wants to, creating for others however he pleases. And that's what moved me the most, more than when Dylan Harper won MVP of another showcase, more than Ace Bailey's flashes. I thought he actually underperformed in some of those showcases, but he's number 4 for me, and I think he's got the best chance of infiltrating higher than that. Is there anyone else? So those 4, I think, have all-star potential. James Barlow said he's got 7 players. Is there anyone else that you think for the Jazz or any other team could become all-stars from this NBA draft class?
Yeah, 2. I would say Trey Johnson. He's going to Texas. He's a wing that's had to play point guard every single year in high school by accident. All right, so he's got a lot of guard skills, very good shooter at 6'6", played with Team USA last year on the U19s, I think, or U18s. He's really good. I like him a lot, can play both ends of the floor, just a modern ideal wing. A little bit short at 6'6", but like you can overcome that very easily. And then Boogie Fland. Boogie Fland's another guy who I saw play in Florida in City of Palms is the tournament. They do it every year. It's like the half of the top 50, I would say, maybe even more, of all classes in high school come out to play. And in the first half, there was a really long period where Boogie Fland was the best player on the floor, including Cooper Flagg. Like his ability to get to his spots, create advantages, like all of that is there. And it's not just because he's small. Like he genuinely knows how to get to his spots, manipulate defenders so well, both for himself and others.
He reminds me of Rob Dillingham, who, if you guys listen to me on this show or Locked on NBA Big Board, I love Dillingham's ability to be shifty, create his own shot, create for others. He's a scorer trapped in a smaller body, so he's a little less coveted than a guy like Traore who's bigger, or a guy like Harper who's got a little size on him to create. But he may be a more naturally gifted scorer with more wiggle and burst than the other guys. Boogie Fland's up there. And then you got a guy with tremendous burst, track speed, and played in the Olympic trials. That's VJ Edgecombe, who I actually came in lower on watching him in high school. And then I watched the Olympic trials, and I thought, you know what? He could be an all-star. He's heading to Baylor under Scott Drew. That could be another Baylor guard. The Jazz love Baylor players. Sell the pitch on VJ Edgecombe.
Yeah, I mean, he's super athletic. He's a little bit undersized, but he's such a strong decision maker. Like his feel for the game, every intangible checks out. And he's got a good jump shot too. So he has like everything except the size.
Yeah, VJ Edgecombe's a track athlete, and he scored 20 a game with a team with Buddy Hield, Eric Gordon, and DeAndre Ayton. That sold me more than just about anything. The respect to get that many shots was unbelievable. And then the one other guy I would throw out there, Trey Johnson, I haven't watched a ton of. I think he's interesting. But the guy that I see a world where he's awesome is Common Malalock. And I actually have more faith than I do in Trey Johnson, VJ Edgecombe, in Common Malalock, because he's young. He's newer to basketball. He's kind of got this lack of polish, but he's got the finesse somehow. He's able to be 7'2" and very thin and play in the Olympics and hold his own, punish people who give him space and knock down jump shots. He's going to be a tremendous rim protector, especially as he packs on weight, especially as he gathers more understanding of the way the game is played. He reminds me of Lively heading to Duke, where Lively was hurt, didn't play a ton, but every time you watched him closely and you thought, hey, how's Duke doing when he plays? They're getting better. I think he's going to be a tremendous anchor for years to come, both at Duke and in the NBA. Someone who has more offensive appeal than maybe the prototypical Rudy Gobert, who is a great vertical rim spacer. I don't have to sell Jazz fans on that. He was amazing. He made our pick and roll go. That's why Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley were able to get good looks. That's why Bojan Bogdanovic and Joe Ingles hit corner threes. But he's going to be better with the ball in his hands. He's going to rim protect at a high level. And I think Common Mallock is the second Duke Blue Devil who will be drafted in the top 10. And I think he's got more potential to be an all-star, a very impactful NBA player than perhaps some of those guards that don't pan out or don't have the ball as often as maybe the top guards of this draft class.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the golden archetype, right? He's 7'2", can stretch the floor potentially, and he's very athletic and can protect the rim. So when you can do that, I think you're going to get a ticket to the lottery. Now, what he does at Duke this year is going to be very intriguing. I've heard people who have him in their top 3. I've heard people who have him in their top 10. And I've heard people who don't even have him in the lottery. So wide range, he's going to be very, I think, polarizing. He's going to be one of those guys where he's on a stacked team. Who knows what happens with this?
Yeah, he's the guy I think I'm most excited to watch. I'm most excited to see him play basketball at Duke because he's going to be a problem protecting the rim. He's going to be someone who offensively doesn't have to do a lot, but it'll be his role in the NBA. So he'll start in his role in college and then be a star in his role in the NBA, much like Lively was. And I think that's the best archetype. Like Mikal Bridges is the best example. He was a star in his role in college, and then he was a star in his role for the Suns. Then he became a pseudo star the next year in while he was taking over in Brooklyn. Now he's going back to being a star in his role on the Nova Knicks or the New York Knicks, if you'd prefer that term. That it's really interesting to me. So Common Mallock's up there. I haven't quite made a big board for you guys, and I know Richard is publishing some early in this cycle, but we're really excited to talk about this. And I think the reason it's so important for Jazz fans to know who's available is because the odds are you probably don't get Cooper Flagg, but you still want to commit to taking. It's not Cooper Flagg or bust. It's you want to elongate the process. You do not want to elongate the process because you want to attack when the iron's hot. The draft is great next year. The Jazz are really, really bad. And if you were to look in the comparison of the Western Conference, like the Thunder are on equal footing age-wise to the Utah Jazz, and they're going to be one of the top teams in the Western Conference and in the NBA. The Timberwolves have a 22-year-old superstar in Anthony Edwards. That's in their own division. The Blazers, if they wanted to compete, they wouldn't be able to compete, but they have the pieces and the youth to be good. That's all in our own division. Now you look at the other teams in the West. You look at the East. The Jazz have no semblance of ability to compete, even if they were to make a trade. So keeping Lauri Markkanen doesn't inhibit the Jazz from getting one of these guys. It may inhibit you from getting Cooper Flagg, and that's what a lot of Jazz fans are going to be worried about, and myself included. But I mean, I really do believe that Ace Bailey could be an all-star wing. I think Brandon Miller's on that trajectory, and Ace Bailey's a better athlete than Brandon Miller, a smooth operator in the mid-range isolation score similar to that of Brandon Miller. Like I said, he's got a body that reminds me of Tracy McGrady. I'm not saying he's quite as skilled as McGrady because I think he's one of the most underrated scorers there's ever been. Dylan Harper, 6'5" lefty, controls the reins for Rutgers. If he puts up a statistical season where he's averaging 18 points, getting you 5-6 assists, and he's a first-team All-Big Ten, maybe an All-American, yeah, he could be an all-star in the NBA. Now you look at Nolan Traore. Think of lightning's fast speed, ability to knock down jump shots, scored 45 in a game this year, was the best player, in my opinion, in the Nike Hoop Summit. He was awesome. And he's playing professional basketball. And like Richard said, more assists than Doncic playing professional basketball. Not quite the same stage, not the same team, but something to take note of. Those four guys, I'm really confident. Now, Common Mallock, to me, I have a little more faith in long-term than Nolan Traore, but not Nolan Traore, than VJ Edgecombe and maybe Trey Johnson, two players Richard mentioned. But it makes me excited to hear about these guys that he thinks they have the chance. James Barlow, who I work with on Locked On NBA Big Board, also had 7 All-Stars. So Kama Malalock's the guy that maybe doesn't factor into the equation as much so, but if the Jazz had a do-over and they had a chance to take Derek Lively, I think they would. Derek Lively's awesome. I think Malalock's got further potential than Derek Lively, and that's his typical NBA archetype right now that he wants to emulate and maybe be better than. So it's right to be excited for this NBA draft. I'm verifying that. And I'm telling you, there's excitement outside of Cooper Flagg, who I think NBA teams have shifted their game plans entering the season after seeing what Cooper Flagg did. In fact, I heard this from a valuable source that teams saw him on Team USA in mid-July and thought, oh, geez, like that's a problem. I think Richard probably was too low on Cooper Flagg, honestly. I think Cooper Flagg is probably going to be a 20-point scorer pretty quickly because the more he has the ball in his hands, the more he's going to be able to dominate with his intangible brilliance. He's able to play without a tremendous shot and still dominate and score. He's able to be more athletic than his competition, fit right in, score a turnaround jump shot over Drew Holiday, knock down a three, come in and tap it in over Anthony Davis. He fits in with NBA athletes at 17 years old. He's going to get bigger and stronger. He's going to get better at shooting. All those things are true. I think he's a special talent. Like I said, similar to Kevin Garnett and the intensity with which he plays. Chet Holmgren had that same appeal to me. I don't know exactly what he is. Maybe he becomes like Pippen, somebody who's a supplementary ball handler in a different era, not quite as dynamic in comparison, but that's the type of player, two-way star who's better on defense but has the requisite traits on offense to be an all-NBA caliber player. I'm really excited about this draft. Now the Utah Jazz, how does that impact them? Well, of course, you got to re-sign Lauri Markkanen or make the trade. That's what's coming up. We're going to talk about that tomorrow on Locked On Jazz. So make sure to stay tuned. It's August 6th tomorrow. You know what that means? Well, August 6th means that's the first day Lauri can sign this. And I don't think he quite does right away. I don't think it happens immediately. But I'll lay out the options. What does it mean? Should he do it? Should he not? What are the potential trade options? What's the latest on that? So I know many of you guys are expecting that today. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow or Wednesday, depending on which day it'll be published. There's only 3 episodes coming out this week. So make sure to stay tuned for that this week, as Jazz fans will finally get a direction, a tip of the cap of which direction the Jazz are heading in terms of what's the news about Lauri Markkanen coming your way on the next Locked On Jazz. Well, thank you for making Locked On Jazz your first listen, as always. We always appreciate it. With your next, tune into Locked On NBA and think about the scope of the NBA. You can hear about what teams are playing the best right now, are figuring to play the best next season with what they're doing right now. What players in the NBA are thriving in the Olympics, not only for the American side, but also for Germany. Dennis Schroeder, Franz Wagner's been sensational. Can the Magic take a leap? That's all there on Locked On NBA. So tune into that. And then with your next Locked On Jazz coming up next, make sure to tune in to hear the latest on Lauri Markkanen and the future of the Jazz as he figures into it. And can the Jazz get any of those guys we talked about today? And let me know below in the comments, do you like the guy like Ace Bailey? Is it Dylan Harper for you? Nolan Traore, VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson, Kama Malalock? Who's your favorite other than Cooper Flagg? And explain to me why. I'll engage with you guys there. So thank you guys for listening. And as always, let me just ask you guys the final question. Have you guys started to watch what Locked On's doing? They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national sports shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available in the free Fire TV channels app. So thank you guys for listening, and as always, go Jazz.